Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry of writing and publishing. And today we are joined by a very talented man, Alan R. Warren, who is a very well-respected Canadian radio host and also an extremely well-respected true crime and mystery author. So we are delighted to welcome you, Alan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Boy, I sound pretty good.
You absolutely do. I've got one thing to tell you later to test your serial killer knowledge, and right. But I will. We wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
I'm doing well, thanks, Roland, and thanks for joining us, Alan. Yeah, listen, you have the credentials here of the true crime expert. You've written close to 40 books on it, right? And you talk about it on you have podcasts and radio shows and all sorts of stuff. So we're really delighted to have you on because true crime is not something that we have. I don't know if we've ever really covered it as a topic on our podcast. And I know that these days, it's such a big popular genre, right? I mean, I'm a fan. I don't even listen to true crime podcast myself, but I watch Only Murders in the Building, which is about a true crime podcast. But yeah, so why don't you start us off by telling us a bit about yourself and sort of how you got into writing true crime, and we'll go from there.
Oh, okay. I don't listen to true crime podcasts either. So just so you know. I can only take so much. Where did I start? Well, I was producing in a radio station and I was doing other people's shows. And actually, I ended up doing an interview for a host that couldn't do it. And they recorded it. And it happened to be with Lee Harvey Oswald, who, not him, but the girlfriend he was seeing at the time when he shot the president back in the 60s. So
I say, did you have a Ouija board?
No, I had a couple-hour interview with her, and it went really well, and we did the editing, and the station put it out, and all of a sudden I started getting offers to do a show, and that led me into a show. And what I started the show, I wanted to do mystery. So it was kind of an unsolved thing. It could be mysteries of science, of paranormal, of like the JFK assassination, just mysteries, and that comes with crime. And that's how it started. And I guess some of the stories were coming, and I got to do some articles for a few newspapers and then a few magazines, and then a publisher approached me from Toronto and said, "Hey, we're doing a series of 20 short books, about different serial killers," and we had a theme. And so I ended up doing 4 of those, and one did really well, and they wanted me to do a full book, and that's where it all kind of started, I would guess. Yeah.
That's great. That's like the dream of most authors, where the publisher comes to them and says, write us a book, right?
Yeah. Well, I really wanted to do that. I'll tell you, one thing that was important to me was I didn't want to self-publish. Not that there's something wrong with it, but for myself, I thought that I wanted the challenge of a publisher who puts you through all the tests, so to speak, when you do the book. And I wanted that challenge because I've self-published as well as done publishers. I just wanted that at the beginning, because then if they said I did okay and wanted to do more, then I felt strong enough to be able to continue that, because I didn't think of myself as a writer. I wasn't like one of the guys that were born and kind of going, I want to write, and they were writing since they were 6, and they're really good with language and grammar and stuff like that. I wasn't that. So it kind of gave me a little bit more I don't know, initiative or feeling of confidence, I guess.
Right. But how long ago was that? Because it was self-publishing even a thing really back then?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't the same as it is now. It wasn't like the drive-through where, you could just go and do it tomorrow and it
right.
was, but you could still do it. And there was a lot of people doing, the vanity presses.
The vanity, well, that's what I was going to say. It's a little different. Yeah.
Yeah. But you could still, there was some that were not so much vanity as you would be edited and do it. It was kind of the onset of it. So it was around, and it was in the back of my mind. And like I said, it was just my personal choice.
Right. And so you've written at this point, fast forward, close to 40 books. And that's all in the sort of nonfiction true crime genre.
Yeah. Well, I definitely all nonfiction, and 38 have been published, and I've got one in a publisher right now that's going through edits. Most of it is true crime, but not always. And when I approach my true crime, I don't go, well, here's a true crime story or a murder or something that happened, and I want to do that. It's more usually what's going on at that time in history. So I look at a location and a time, and I put myself into that. And what I have to do is assemble, let's say, the characters. Like you have to get to meet them if they're still alive, or find out who they are. But I have to understand how they lived and where they lived and what's going on around them. Because if I don't write it from that perspective, someone that didn't live it wouldn't understand it as well. I think the biggest problem when I read myself is I get thrown out of time because people write it from, let's say, the time they were writing it. So, and I was watching a crime series on Netflix, and this is supposed to be happening in the 60s, this series, and someone gets killed, and sorry for your loss. And they were talking 2020. They were behaving like it was today. And that throws me, because, if some of us are older and we've lived and we knew what it was like to be alive in the 60s or 70s and 80s, there's a different feel to what it is today. And if I don't put that in there, if that context isn't there, someone that's born in 2000, who's 25, 26 right now, will read it with today's mindset, thinking that people should act like they do now. And what's important to them today was then, and it isn't. It's so different. And I think that's so important. So I look at myself as writing a history book, and then along comes a person, like, let's say, Charles Manson. And how did they get away with what they did? How did they do that? How did they fit in society? So, like, my book on Manson is about that. It's about how did he get through his life with everything going on. So everything in there, from the moon landing to, the race riots to the president being shot, it's all part of your atmosphere. And you need that to feel it.
Right.
And then you can understand him better, maybe, so that's kind of, I guess I went on too long, but that's kind of my idea of how I write books. So it's a little, I always take it from history first, I guess is.
That sounds really good, actually. I just watched a movie, Sinners, which is set in the 1930s, and a lot of the beginning of that was, this is the 1930s. Stuff was different back then, because it is really important. And I guess especially with serial killers, because, serial killers couldn't get away with half the stuff they do now, with every single phone having a GPS in it and cameras everywhere.
Right. And cameras everywhere,
They have to adapt just as we all do. And the thing is, too, plus what's in your mindset. What's going on around you? Because, like, even today, you can look at what's going on around us, like with politics and all the stuff going on. That affects how we act today, how we act with each other, and what we do with each other, and what we think. And so that's important, because, back in the Manson days, for instance, he was picking up 14, 15-year-old girls and getting them to join the commune, the family. But someone today might go, how could you do that? Well, you probably couldn't today. But back then, he was mesmerizing. He was a 30-something-year-old man. They were all running away or taking off, going to Haight-Ashbury. It was peace, love, the hippies. It was a total different feeling for a 15-year-old. And also, you got to understand how that 15-year-old would feel in 1965. Who is that person? What do they do day to day? And then you can sort of pick up and understand what he did. Because I think, in essence, what I'm saying is, someone like, let's say, Charles Manson, as an example, could have never done what he did back in that place. It had to be 65, San Francisco. He couldn't come today in 2020 and be in Boston or London and do it.
But isn't it kind of like, I mean, it's a little different level. He wasn't killing them, but Epstein was sort of doing that sort of thing where he's
again, but that kind of goes to the point of, in the sense that you had to have the type of people living the lifestyle that they were living and right. doing the things they did in order for that to work. Like he fit in with that. A hippie guru like that today with the internet and social media, it wouldn't work. Like he would have to adapt into an Epstein, for instance, and I don't think he would have, because frankly, I don't think he was that kind of character in that way. Like there's something different about him, and
right.
You know, because I don't know Epstein well enough to say, but
yeah, no, I mean, it's like I agree. It's like the personality, the society that they live in, the time that they live in, it all goes together. And I guess that's how their personalities sort of like, you have to have that perfect storm for it to work. And it isn't, you know, that's why luckily it doesn't happen that often, I guess, is because you don't get that perfect storm too often where somebody figures it all out. But I think it's fascinating that that idea that, you know, it's like these even the serial killers are adapting. It's like, okay, you know, they look at the old stuff and they're like, okay, that doesn't work anymore. There's too many cameras around. Now I have to do things differently.
Yeah, they have to adjust. But look at the Stephen Port in London. He was caught on camera, but he still got away with things. It wasn't until much later, because even a lot of the modern technologies we have, we don't use in a way that we should necessarily, or the policing don't necessarily do it. So, you know, and that's, again, it comes down to what's going on in the community. You know, it's gay murders. It's a lot of stuff like, so what was it felt like at the time, and how would the police in that area? That was a big controversy at that time, that whole serial killer bit, Stephen Port. And so that kind of causes issues too, right? So that's why it's important to get into the history. For me, anyway, that's kind of...
Yeah, no, it happens now too. And you see, like, the around here, and I'm sure everywhere, you know, the crooks are getting more brazen. They're trying a lot of home invasions, and people have cameras. It's not like they don't look at the Guthrie case, right? Like they have cameras, right? And sure, they wear their masks, which maybe they could never have gotten away with pre-COVID. Everybody walking around with masks, right? I remember when COVID first started, and we had to wear a mask, and I'd like walk into a bank with a mask on and be like, I feel like I'm about to rob this place. Yeah. Like it just didn't feel right, you know, but everybody's sort of adjusting. And then, as you said, like society, or you could say, okay, yeah, we should be able to do something with it. We should be able to look at the tapes and this and that, but then look at the controversy that happened with that Guthrie case, right? Where they had the camera and they said, oh, we didn't get the footage. And then they went to Google and they asked Google to pull the old, because it was on the Nest, right? And they went to their backups because it was supposed to have been deleted. And they went to their backups and they were able to sort of regenerate the deleted files and get that footage. Right. And so now society's like, on the one hand, all the privacy people are like, "Oh, that's supposed to be deleted." Like, you know, they're keeping our deleted stuff. But then everyone else is like, "Yeah, but it just helped us find this footage." It's like, yeah.
And that whole thing, that in itself is its own behaviorism. That you know, if you think about today, if you're writing about something today, in 30 years from now, you're writing about some sort of crime in 2025 or 6, you'd be like, thinking about these subjects, but you have to have that and that kind of controversy going on. People going, well, it's all right, you can't do this, and you can't. That feeling is very strong today. The conspiracy right now is huge in
privacy.
Privacy, yeah. Who's, you know, they are watching us. They are doing, you know. So that's really important, right? So yeah, it's, you know, yeah, that's key.
So you sort of touched on this a little bit. I was going to ask, like, what kind of research you do. It sounds like you if you can, you talk to the people, you go and meet with them. You do you? I guess at this point, you know, you've written 38 books. You kind of have a good idea of how well they're going to be received. You probably have, let's say a larger budget that you can put towards traveling and meeting people than somebody who was maybe just starting out and wanted to write something, and would have to sort of like foot their own bills for and have no idea whether it's going to be successful or not, right? To be able to, fly around the country or different countries to talk to people, or I guess you can do it over Zoom if you want, but then you can't really immerse yourself. So what's your process like for that?
Usually when I hear about a story or I hear something, and a lot of people, this has been for years, have always, I don't know why I'm thinking about this now. They come to me and tell me about a murder and I should write about it. Or something. It's like, I don't know. Even before I was really a big writer, and they were like, "Hey, do you hear about this?" But for me, I always tried to contact survivors, police, witnesses, doctors, anybody that was involved in the case. So, and the main thing is family and survivors of the family, or whatever that side, the victims. If they want to take part in it and they're supportive of it, then I'll move the next step. If they all say no, not really, I don't want to talk about this, and I've had that happen, then absolutely not. Then it just goes in a file on my computer somewhere, and that's it. It gets left. But if they are involved, and then I start with that, and then I put out the feeler. So if there's a killer that's still alive that's in prison, because each one you have to do differently, I'll go to that jurisdiction and see what it takes to see that person, and then see if they want to be involved. And then I put out, find who the officers were that arrested, detectives. I do the whole works, and I see who I can get together. And all these things takes time. So usually I'm doing 4 or 5 cases at the same time. Usually that's like right now I've got 6 different ones running. And because what you're doing is you're gathering information, and I know that it takes time. So and as you get assembled, and then all of a sudden you can write the book, it's all there. So and as far as when you say I still don't know what's going to be a hit and well received. I have no idea. No, I really don't, because there's books I've done, and then 6 years they've been a flop, and then 6 years later they're selling like crazy, and then they're making a Netflix series about it, and all, and you're like, wow, that's I never saw that coming, right? So, and there's ones I put out. I mean, The Butcher of Hanover I thought was the best book I'd ever written. Man, I was just thrilled and honored. Get that out, and it's like, nobody wants it. It's just like it's got published, but it's not.
And it seems like it would be more about, I guess, the notoriety of the subject matter more than the writing of the book, maybe.
More than likely, it's going to be the subject, and what it is and how it fits into what people are talking about, and that's why sometimes like it comes up years later, like that. When that Deadly Betrayal thing, and it was like years later, and it never really sold, and I did that for a Toronto publisher, and it sat and it was there, and all of a sudden it went crazy, and I didn't know why, and it was just because they decided to do a Netflix show on her. Okay. And then all of a sudden everybody and their dog had to get the book, right that I never saw that coming. So you don't really know. You might put in a lot of time and money into something, and you can't think about that. You just have to kind of do it right. And then at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. That's terrible. That's hard. I know if you're struggling, it's hard to say, but at the end of the day, you did a good piece of work. It's a good book, lots of information. People are going to be thrilled. And if it doesn't sell that well, at least you did a really good job. Right. That's all I can say. And you're doing what you're doing. And that's the best part of writing for me anyway, not about,
absolutely.
Yeah. With any luck, I mean, people have an insatiable thirst for true crime and serial killers. So even if you write a brilliant book about one who's fairly obscure, at some point he might have a Netflix TV show written about him. And then look, there happens to be a book already written by one of the most respected authors on the subject. So
yeah, and quite a few times they'll contact me too, and they'll say, "Oh, we're doing this, and we want to use your book, and we'll, and they credit you and stuff, and then that's great, So it's all plus. You just don't know. So that the more you can avoid that, like I think too, as I get older, if I look for something and think, wow, that would be a great book to write about, or that would be a great, boy, everybody would love that. Those are the ones I'm staying away from now more, because it's almost like jumping on the bandwagon, and you're also,
Right.
I find that then I write toward what I think they want to hear. You know, so it changes my perspective, and I don't know that I want to do that. There's a lot that will, so it's not like it's going to be missed, you know. Like,
well, that's what I was wondering too. Is like, are you writing about stories that a lot of other people have written? Like, I mean, Manson's got to be a topic that's been covered by tons of writers, right? So how come you decided to cover that topic specifically when you know that like a bunch of other people have written that?
I think for me it was because it was personal in the fact that over the years doing interviews, I had interviewed so many members of his family. I had interviewed even Tex Watson in prison. So many people I have talked to around that case for years. And so I had all of this stuff sitting there for 15 years. And the other thing was, most of what had been written about Manson had been centered on the actions of the Tate LaBianca murders and nothing else. You know, you might hear about some of his child life, you know, they're like, you know, he was, but it was missing a lot. You know, it was all about Helter Skelter and all that stuff. And that's all part of who he was and what happened. But there's so much more. There were so many events that happened that were missing, and I really wanted to tell the history of it, because you could see him going through and doing something that would cause him some sort of grief or trouble, and he would react to that, and that each one of those reactions is what led to it more than the actual Helter Skelter. Like, it wasn't just him listening to the Beatles and doing LSD. There was a lot of things that one thing led to another, right? And I thought that was missing. That's missing, because you're just getting a narrow point. And again, so I think, so like I said, I had a lot of research done for 15 years, and I thought, I'm getting old. I better do this while I can, because I think it's an addition to what people have written, not better or worse. It's just something that people have not written about. I think that's all.
Did you ever meet with him?
No, didn't want to.
No.
Didn't want to. Not that I didn't, because I've met tons of murderers and written to lots too. But with him particularly, he was beyond worth meeting. And I mean that in sense of you would get 100% what he wanted you to get and nothing more. He would give you what he needed you to hear so that he could get what he wanted from you. Do you know what I mean? Like, anything he gave me would be just made up, I guess.
Right.
You know, he's not going to, he's like, oh, here's this guy. What do I, and he would tell me what he would feed me to keep me going so that he could get something out of me. But what he's given me is just stuff. You know, he did that over and over. And look at him even in court. Like, he'd stand up and do a big show, and the judge would clear him out, and he'd be freaking and screaming. And even the guards, as soon as they get him into the side room, oh, he's like real quiet, sits down. Hey, can I get and he's just talking normal. It was just a show. Because he wanted something in that reaction. And so he did it for that. So I think that's all I would get from someone like him.
Right.
It's not, I'm going to sit down and he's going to have a heart-to-heart talk about, mother was this. It's just not, that's.
So okay, so you said you've met with a bunch of murderers. I mean, I don't know the details of them all, but just from watching a lot of television, I have this feeling that most of them are claiming innocence. And but is that the case, or are you talking to people that are basically like at this point, like, yeah, I did it, and they're happy to talk to you about it, or are you trying to draw it out of them and they're not willing to talk about it, and that makes it more difficult? Like, what's the process of talking to somebody like that and getting the information you need?
Well, I think everyone I talked to was pretty open about doing what they did. If anything, a few of them might have been a little bit more giving excuses. Like Stephen Port, I have tons of letters with him, right? And he had excuses for everything and would tell you things to make you try and think he's okay. He's not that bad. Like he sort of had reasons for everything he did, and he made sure you knew it. So that was kind of one thing. But then Ian Brady, who was was not. He was quite proud of his accomplishments, so to speak, and would give you a lot more detail on the subject and a lot of other things. He was a very smart man, very smart man. I was taken by him because he was one of the few that was like a Hannibal Lecter, a really intelligent person. Because most of the time when you meet them, like you hear all this, like a lot of the programs will say they're all super intelligent, and a lot of movies make you think that they're just this super smart, intellectual and all. No, it's 1 out of 10 you come across. It's like, wow, this person's actually really got it together. Like, wow, how did they end up in doing this? And then it becomes interesting because most of them are just. I just met that guy it was a Canadian serial killer, and he was in prison, and he's in his 60s, and he's soft spoken and quiet, and in fact, you could see him out in the street in our shopping mall, and you'd think he's just a normal guy, just a nice guy, but nothing super, nothing bad, nothing. You were just a normal, actual person, and so if anything, I find that most of them were like the people you meet out in the store, not to scare you, but I think that's probably the realistic. When you meet someone that's super intelligent, they tend not to be the serial killer, in my experience. But on TV.
So what is it you're trying to get out of them, though?
I don't try to get anything out of them anymore. Like I don't go in going, well, I want to find out this, or I want to find out that. For the most part, all I'm doing is I come in and it's like get to know them. I don't want them to talk about the crime. I don't really necessarily want them to talk about what they do with other people. I'd rather just sit down and kind of think, what do what floats your boat, so to speak? Like Stephen Port was all into Star Wars, and he would draw things and send them to me, and he was into the latest gadget that was coming out, even though he's in prison for life. But that was what he's in. But you see, that's what I mean. But you find out about the person, and I think, and I hope that it's a different angle than just going, well, why would you kill? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Or what, your mother was mean. Your dad was a drunk. And so many of them cover that, and that's great. Let them do that. That's what they do. But I don't want to just do that. I'd rather just sit down and have a conversation. It's almost like the radio shows, or even like your podcast. You sit there and you find out what they do, but you find out more about the person too, right? It's like having a conversation. You're having a coffee or a beer with them and kind of going, well, and they tell you things, and that kind of gives you an insight to why they're doing what they're doing more than how. So I think so for me, it's just getting to know the person. If you read the one, I've got that Pen and Blood book that's got some of the interviews or letters, it's just more about they would send things, what they liked and what they didn't like, and they would tell you things, and these happened over a few years, and you would get kind of feelings, and also their opinions on stuff. What's going on in the news, or they heard this, or that person died, or this actress they loved and they're upset that they died, and things like that. I think that gives you kind of an insight to knowing that they're human, and then you can try to figure out how they got from that to what they did.
How many of them have an ego? Because I got into a chat with somebody at work about the Zodiac Killer, and the Zodiac Killer seemed to have a big ego and almost wanted to be found with the messages, and it's almost like a puzzle that people are still. That seems to me to be the difference between a killer who just kills because they need to, and a serial killer who, to a certain extent, does it performatively.
Yeah, and that's a different type of person, because you have that in every job. Like every job I've ever worked, whether it be in a department store or like all the jobs we do, right, when we're getting through life, there's always those people. There's ones that are just serial
killers?
Yeah, even when I was doing that, right? No, but there's people that just have an ego. There's people that do things performatively no matter what, whether they're a mechanic, they're a salesman, they're a dancer, whatever. You see it in Hollywood, you see it everywhere. There's people that have that. Ego is a good thing because it creates a drive, it creates a need to accomplish something, right? I think there's something to it, but there's a time when it becomes the only thing you do it for, and if that happens, then you get into trouble. And I think Zodiac Killer's that. Zodiac Killer was doing it because of that, but also because there's another element there. Zodiac, just like probably Jack the Ripper, both were doing killings to try and I don't want to say punish, but let's say tell the world what they're doing wrong. He was there to correct them. This is the bad thing. And they would do things to sample it to the mass to kind of let you know what you're doing wrong. This is what's wrong with the world today, like that idea. And so they're punishing people. So there's an ego to it because they believe they're above people in order to do that, right? And they're telling you that. Leopold and Loeb out of the, in Chicago in the 20s, the Nietzschean. So they sort of totally believed in that they were above, so they could kill and hurt anybody that was in the lower level, and they were above being punished in their mind. They had that right. That's ultimate ego. So there's that too, right? So there's such a variance in that. I don't think Zodiac was that, or Jack the Ripper, but they were out to, in their mind, right the world. And that's a different type of ego, but they're out to kind of police the world because we're not doing it right. So I don't know, Zodiac is going to be, who knows? Because we're never really going to know. There's so many unsolved parts to that. And there's so many questions about that case that I think we just have to settle on, bits and pieces. Even though, they're going to fight about that until time's end, probably, just like Jack the Ripper. They're always being
right. Well, so actually that brings up a point. Like, do you tend to only write about cases where it's basically solved, like they've figured out who the killer is, or do you ever write about unsolved ones, Jack the Ripper type cases where they have never found the killer, they don't know who he is, and then is the purpose of that to sort of like help figure it out as like a detective kind of thing, or is it really just to tell the story so that other people understand what's going on and why it's such a mystery?
I've done both, and what I do with like the Zodiac book that I wrote, as well as the Jack the Ripper, is I found experts in that field and I wrote it with them. So I took them and I kind of thought, okay, so what's your evidence? What's your story? And so I would present each case with an overview and kind of like, here's what happened. Here's the facts. This is the murder. This is how it happened. This is what we know. And then I would take each expert and have them go through it in a sense of, they would tell me, this is why I think this person did it, because this and that. And sort of, I'm just kind of giving people an overview because, again, I don't believe there's an answer. A lot of them do. And some of them are sworn like this is it. There's 100%. They jump up and down and they're totally into it. And man, those groups, they really fight. Wow. Some of those Facebook groups, holy cow, they get into it, man. But I just wanted to present those cases like that. So I write it in a different way. That's a different type of book. And I like doing both types of books. And I kind of go back and forth because it gives me a break from what I'm doing. But there's nothing like the case where you get around and meet people and do those. And sometimes you need a break. Like that last one I'd written just a couple of years ago. You go and you meet all the survivors and the people and the ones that made it and all that. And you're spending days with them over a year, right? You spend a lot of time. And it's really hard. You go through all that. You kind of live the experience through them. And then you write it all out and make sure they're happy with the book. And then you go through and it gets published. You need a break from that a little bit, So then you jump into Jack the Ripper. You see, because Jack the Ripper's not personal. It's gone. Like, you don't have to talk to it. It's hundreds, it's a long time ago. There's no skin in it, so to speak. There's no personal. You're not sitting there talking to someone that's got one arm and that got attacked and was beat up and all that, and you're going through all that sadness and all that stuff. It's just it's distant. It's not as, you can do a lot of work on that interviewing and talking, and then you can go out and have dinner and it's okay. But with the other ones, a lot of times you don't. It's just
emotionally heavy, right?
It's really heavy. So it's kind of nice to do both, and I like doing some of the older cases best because of that, because it's kind of a break.
So my little tidbit challenge for you is I recently went to Europe, and my father has this massive collection of Victorian books, and there was one of them which is the poems of Alfred Lord Tennyson, and it was like from 1856 or something, and inside was a signature of a William Withers Gull, who, well, I'll throw it out to you if you. I mean, I don't know how close you think that is a theory or not, but.
No.
Some people think there was a movie called From Hell with Johnny Depp where they thought he was the Jack the Ripper, but I don't think it's a very credible theory.
No, I personally, I don't, but that's only, again, like I don't hold, from what I know, I would say, no, that's great entertainment and that's it.
Yeah.
That's as far as I go. And I think it brings people into the case, and that's wonderful. I like that. But, and Johnny Depp, it's all good, but no,
there's so many theories about,
yeah, that's what I mean. It's beyond, those cases are so beyond, and we can't really get evidence. Like, the guy with the shawl, and I've talked to him twice and interviewed him and stuff. And it's so distant. We can never really capture the facts because it's too long ago. It's too much. Yeah. It's not like we're going to get like the Golden State, killer that they got because of DNA. Those days are gone in these cases. We're sort of stuck with that. And I just, I'd rather take what I do know, and then there's possibilities. Tell you the truth, I think Jack the Ripper's in those cases, they're going to be someone we didn't even have on the watch list.
Probably, but we'll never know. Like you
we'll
said,
never know.
I mean, especially if they're not on the watch list. I mean, I don't know how we'd ever figure it out.
It's like Zodiac. Look how many times you get people that it's their father, their grandfather, and stuff coming out and writing a book and doing that. It's like, my father hated women, right? That's what they say, and they used to beat up my mother and girls and stuff. And it's like, well, that's terrible, but there's a lot of people like that. You need a little more than that, right?
Right. That didn't become serial killers.
Yeah. You need a little more.
A lot to it.
And some people I really respect. Look at the cop, Steve Odell. He was a sergeant in LA, and it's his father that he thinks is Zodiac. And his father also killed the Black Dahlia, and now his father's the lipstick killer in Chicago. And and I'm thinking in the 60s, I'm thinking, wow. I don't know. What do you say to that? Right? I mean,
he's a busy chap.
Yeah, his dad was
pretty old. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was. Yeah, but I'm just like thinking, wow, this is terrible.
God forbid a man have hobbies.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, kept him busy. But it's sad in a way. Because you have to wonder what's going on with that person to make them think that their father or grandfather or whatever the case is such an awful person. So I don't know. Like I said, it's so beyond now. I don't really.
I mean, lately it feels like true crime has become more popular. And what is it that you think that draws readers to the genre? Is it just that whole like macabre of getting in the mind of a killer and, feeling something that they don't necessarily always feel, and maybe they're going to start looking at their neighbors a little differently if they could figure out what makes somebody tick.
Yeah, you got the camera aiming at the neighbor, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I'm not sure. I think there's a whole lot going on in the country, and there's a whole lot going on in the world, and I think that's all part of the setting that creates this. Because true crime was really a big, the paranormal in the First World War when it was ending, and everybody was having, speakers coming and seances and trying to talk to the dead because they're kids would go away to war and they never came back to America or Canada, and they never saw them again. And that became huge. And then along with that came all these true crime things were huge in these magazines and books and stuff. And then it disappeared. And look how it came back again in the 60s. All those true detective magazines and books that were out. And I think there's something to do with the unrest of the world and true crime, and that I think we like it. There's some sort of connection, and that's when it peaks out. And I think right now we're in the same time as we were in McCarthyism and stuff like that. And so we've got all these. Maybe it's a sense of us having some control over the bad in a power. I don't know. I wished, if I was a psychiatrist, I think I would go into that and try to find out what's really going on here. I wished I knew.
I was going to say, actually, we're reaching the top of the hour, but as a final question, I would love to know, when you were writing these books, do you format them into a story kind of thing? Do you use kind of a format to, because I mean, one of the things I've noticed about the true crime books that I've read that have really stood out is like you're reading it and it's all factual, but at the same time, it's like a mystery because you get these nuggets of dopamine at the end of each chapter and it wraps up in a very satisfying way, even if you can't like declare definitively that this man was a killer.
Some I do and some I don't, right? Because how do I say this? I don't get into the gore. Like when you're reading the book, there's very few books that go through all the details because it's not necessary, or because the family's still alive and they were kind of like not really keen on certain things coming out. So some of them aren't. So those ones are not narrated the same way. But then some books are into a storyline like that. They're turned into a narration and it sounds like you're reading a mystery. So it's back and forth. I wouldn't say I'm set one way or the other, if that makes sense. I think the older the story, the more narration I get into, because I feel like it's a little bit easier to do that. Once you capture the writing and the feeling of the characters and how they spoke to each other and how they behaved around their family and stuff, you can narrate that a lot easier than a story where you don't know anything about them. So it depends. Some people will create that, but I won't with someone I don't know. It kind of seems dirty. I don't know. I don't want to just make up what I think that person is, and some do.
And I think maybe that's why your books are so respected, is because you don't do that. You don't wrap everything up with a neat bow, because that's not what is reality.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to. Oh, I don't want to make it up. I don't want you to think, I don't want to create a character that's real, whether they're the good guy or bad guy, and then kind of make up all this stuff. And then that's what you think. And they do that a lot in the movies lately. I notice, like in some of these based on a true crime. They just did one on that Rodney Alcala, which I wrote the book on and did all that stuff. I was one of the guys, and Matt Murphy was the prosecutor and did that. And there was just that movie, Woman of the Hour or something. And other than him and the girl that he had met on the dating game, all these characters were made up. It was completely, none of it was true. People weren't true. What had happened in the story wasn't true. And if you talk to the director and some of the people go, yeah, but we want action. We want to keep people tuned in. And so they created a story, and it's based on the real guy, and he really did kill. Yeah, and I guess that's true, but it's just the actual narration story. None of that's real.
I find that kind of storytelling disappointing. I often, when I watch something that's supposedly based on a true story, and I watch it and all this weird, crazy stuff seems to happen, I'm always Googling it after to see what was true and what wasn't. And it's very disappointing when you find out how much
it's terrible, especially when they make up all these characters. Even if they narrated the character and he was a bad guy, so we'll make him mean and do this, and that would be one thing, but have the true facts. They made up everything. Like that was crazy for me. I mean, it's a great thriller, but but that's happening a lot. So I don't know. I'm not really into that either. So now,
unfortunately, it looks like we're approaching the top of the hour, so we're going to have to wrap things up. But this has been such a fascinating discussion. Where can people find out more about your books, more about your writing, and more about you?
Well, probably the best place is just my website, alanrwarren.com. Pretty simple. It's got connection to the show. It's got connection to all the books. Anything, it's all there. They can even contact me or whoever and go from there. That's it. That's probably the best place. I'm all over social media too. Facebook, whatever. They're all over. everywhere.
Well, we'll put a link to your website down in the description of this video. So if you've been listening to this and enjoying everything that Alan had to share, which I think you have been, then make sure you scroll down there, click on that link, and go and check out his show, his books, everything like that. And while you're down there, you'll pass that big empty comment section. So make sure you leave Alan a comment and let him know how much you enjoyed everything he shared with us today. And while you're down there, there's that like button. Give that a smash, as the kids say. There's the subscribe button if you haven't already, and of course there is the bell icon that you can click to make sure you're notified every time there is a new episode of Fully Booked, and there will be a brand new episode of Fully Booked coming out next week. So until then, cheerio.